I'm going to play, he told Ron and Hermione. If I don't, all the Slytherins will think I'm just too scared to face Snape. I'll show you them. It's really wipe the smiles of their faces if we win. Just as long as we're not wiping you off the field, said Hermione. As the match drew nearer, however, Harry became more and more nervous. Whatever he told Ron and Hermione, the rest of the team wasn't too calm either. The idea of overtaking Slytherin in the House Championship was wonderful. No one had done it for 7 years, but would they be allowed to with such a biased referee? Harry didn't know whether he was imagining it or not, but he seemed to keep running into Snape wherever he went at times. He even wondered whether Snape was following him, trying to catch him on his own. Potions lessons were turning into a sort of a weekly torture. Snape was so horrible to Harry. Could Snape possibly know they found out about the Sorcerer's Stone? Harry didn't see how he could, yet he sometimes had the horrible feeling that Snape could read minds. Harry knew when they wished him good luck outside the locker rooms the next afternoon that Ron and Hermione were wondering whether they'd ever see him alive. This wasn't what you call comforting. Harry hardly heard a word of Wood's pep talk as he pulled on his Quidditch robes and picked up his Nimbus 2000 broomstick. Ron and Hermione, meanwhile, had found a place in the stands next to Neville, who couldn't understand while they looked so grim and worried, or why they had brought their wands to the match. Little did Harry Little did Harry know that Ron and Hermione had been secretly practicing the leg locker curse. They'd gotten the idea from Malfoy using it on Neville and were ready to use it on Snape if he showed any sign of wanting to hurt Harry. Now don't forget, it's Locomotor Mortis, Hermione muttered, and Ron slipped his wand up his sleeve. I know, Ron said. Don't nag. Back in the locker room, Would taken Harry aside. Don't want to pressure you, Potter, but if you ever need an early capture of the snitch, it's now. Finish the game before Snape can favor Hufflepuff too much. The whole school's out there, said Fred Weasley, peering out of the door. Even blind me, Dumbledore's come to watch. Harry's heart did a somersault. Dumbledore, he said, dashing to the door to make sure Fred was right. There was no mistaking that Silverbrand. Harry could have laughed out loud. It with relief was saved. There was simply no way that Snape would dare try to hurt him. If Dumbledore was watching, perhaps that was why Snape was looking so angry at the team's march onto the field. Something that Ron noticed too. I've never seen Snape look so mean, he told Hermione. Look, they're off. Ouch. Someone had poked Ron in the back of the head. It was Malfoy. Oh, sorry, we didn't see you there. Malfoy grinned broadly at Crabbe and Goyle. Wonder how long Potter's going to stay on his broom this time. Anyone want to bet? What about you, Weasley? Ron didn't answer. Snape just awarded Hufflepuff a penalty, but George Weasley had hit a bludger at him. Hermione, who had all her fingers crossed in her lap, squinting fixedly at Harry, who was circling the game like a hawk, looking for the snitch. You know how I think they choose people for the Gryffindor's team, said Malfoy loudly a few minutes later as Snape awarded Hufflepuff another penalty for no reason at all. It's the people they feel sorry for. See, there's Potter, who's got no parents. Then there's the Weasleys, who've got no money. You should be on the team, Longbottom. You've got no brains. Neville went bright red, but turned in his seat to face Malfoy. I'm worth 12 of you, Malfoy. He stammered. Malfoy crabbed, and Goyle howled with laughter. But Ron, still not daring to take his eyes from the game, he said, "You tell him, Neville." Looking, Longbottom, if brains were gold, you'd be poorer than Weasley. Then that's saying something. Ron's nerves were already stretched to the breaking point with anxiety about Harry. "I'm warning you, Malfoy. One more word," Ron said. Hermione suddenly. Harry, "What? Where?" Harry had suddenly gone in a spectacular dive, which drew gasps and cheers from the crowd. Hermione stood up, her crossed fingers in her mouth, as Harry streaked toward the ground like a bullet. "You're in luck. Where's Potter?" "Obviously spotted some money on the ground," said Malfoy. Ron snapped before Malfoy knew what was happening. Ron was on top of him, wrestling him to the ground. Neville hesitated, then clambered over the back of his seat to help. "Come on, Harry," Hermione screamed, leaping onto her seat to watch as sped straight at Snape. She didn't even notice Malfoy and Ron rolling around under her seat. Of the scuffles and yelps coming up the whirl of fists. That was Neville crabbing Goyle up in the air. Snape turned on his broomstick just in time to see something scarlet shoot him past him, missing by his inches. The next second, Harry had pulled out of the dive, his arm raised in triumph, the snitch clasped in his hand. The stands erupted. It had to be recorded. No one could ever remember the snitch being uncaught so quickly. Ron, where are you? The game's over. Harry won. We've won. Gryffindor is in the lead," shrieked Hermione, dancing up and down and on her seat, hugging Parvati Patil in the row in front. Harry jumped off his broom a foot from the ground. He couldn't believe it. He'd done it. The game was over. It had barely lasted 5 minutes as Gryffindor came spilling onto the field. He saw Snape land nearby, white-faced and tight-lipped. Then Harry felt a hand on his shoulder and looked up into Dumbledore's smiling face. "Well done," said Dumbledore quietly, so that only could Harry hear. "Nice to see you haven't been brooding about the mirror, been keeping busy. Excellent." Snape sat bitterly on the ground. Harry left the locker room alone sometime later to take his Nimbus 2000 back to the broom shed. He could ever remember feeling happier. He'd really done something to be proud of now. No one could say he was just as famous name anymore. The evening air had smelled so sweet. He walked over the damp grass, relieving the last hour in his head, which was a happy blur. Gryffindors running to lift him onto their shoulders. Ron and Hermione in the distance, jumping up and down and cheering through a heavy nosebleed. Harry had reached the shed. He leaned against the wooden door and looked up at Hogwarts with its glowing red in setting sun. Gryffindor in the lead. "He's done it," he'd shown Snape. And speaking of Snape, a hooded figure came with a swiftly down the footsteps of the castle. Clearly not wanting to be seen, it walked as fast as possible toward the Forbidden Forest. Harry's victory faded from his mind, and as He watched, he recognized the figures prowling walk, Snape sneaking into the forest while everyone was at dinner. What was going on? Harry jumped back on his Nimbus 2000 and took gliding silently over the castle. He saw Snape enter the forest at a run. He followed. The trees were so thick he couldn't see where Snape had gone. He flew in circles, lower and lower, brushing the top branches of trees, and until he heard voices, glided toward them and landed noiselessly in a towering beech tree. He climbed carefully along on one of the branches, holding tight to his broomstick, trying to see through the leaves. Below, in a shadowy clearing, stood Snape, but he wasn't alone. Quirrell was there too. Harry couldn't make out the look on his face, but he was stuttering worse than ever. Harry strained to catch what they were saying. Don't know why you wouldn't to meet here, of all places, Severus. Oh, I thought he be keep this private," said Snape. His voice icy. Students aren't supposed to know about the Sorcerer's Stone after all. Harry leaned forward. Quirrell was mumbling something. Snape interrupted him. Have you found out to get past the bees of Hagrid's yet? But Severus, you don't want me as your enemy, Quirrell, said Snape. As I told him, I don't know what you mean. You perfectly know what I mean. An owl hooted loudly, and Harry nearly fell out of the tree. He steadied himself in time to hear Snape say, "You're a little bit of hocus pocus. I'm waiting, but I don't know very well," Snape cut in. We'll have a little chat soon, when you have time to think things over and decided where your loyalties lie. He threw his cloak over his head and strode out of the clearing. It was almost dark now. Harry could see Quirrell standing quite still, as though he was petrified. "Harry, where have you been?" Hermione squeaked. "We won! You won! We won!" shouted Ron, the thumping Harry on the back. "And I gave Malfoy a black eye, and Neville tried to take on Crabbe and Goyle single-handed. He's still out cold, but Madame Pomfrey says he'll be all right. Talk about showing Slytherin. Everyone's waiting for you in the common room. We're having a party." Fred and George stole some cakes and stuff from the kitchens. "Never mind that now," said Harry breathlessly. "Let's find an empty room. You'll wait until you hear this." He made sure Peeves wasn't inside before shutting the door behind them. Then he told them what he'd seen and heard. "So we were right. It is the Sorcerer's Stone, and Snape's trying to force Quirrell to help him get it. He asked if he knew how to get past Fluffy, and he said something about Quirrell's hocus pocus. I reckon there are other things guarding the stone, apart from Fluffy. Loads of enchantments, probably." And Quirrell would have done so anti-darks and spell that that Snape needs to break. "So you mean the stone's only safe as long Quirrell stands up to Snape?" said Hermione in alarm. "It'll be gone by next Tuesday," said Ron.